On the morning of September 10th, 2025, Clarence House was wrapped in an unusual silence. No voices, no press cameras, only a few security vehicles quietly parked by the gate. No one knew what was happening inside until the news began to spread like wildfire. Prince Harry, the son who had once walked away from the royal family, had secretly met with King Charles. After years of cold distance, this was the first time father and son were seen under the same roof again. The news sent shockwaves across the British media. Many believed this could be the first step toward the long-awaited reunion the public had hoped for over the past 4 years. But for those who remembered what Harry had done, things weren't so simple. Because this once beloved prince hadn't just left the monarchy, he had betrayed the very institution that raised him. Harry had turned his royal roots into a brand to make money, from the bitter interviews to the tell-all memoir exposing family secrets, to multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix. Every word he spoke, every detail he shared, carved deeper wounds into the image of the British monarchy. And now, after all the pain, he stood once again before the doors of Clarence House. The meeting lasted only 53 minutes, but could 53 minutes really erase 4 years of tension, betrayal, and heartbreak? After 4 years apart, could 53 minutes behind closed doors heal the wounds of a broken royal family? What about you? Do you believe Harry truly came home to his family? Or is this just another chapter in his ongoing royal business saga? To understand why this meeting moved the entire nation, we have to look back to the years of pain that shaped Prince Harry's life. From childhood, Harry was always the different one in the royal family. He wasn't born to be king, and he never wanted to live trapped within the palace's cold, unspoken rules. By his side was his mother, Princess Diana, a woman who dared to defy every royal convention just to show her sons what real love and freedom looked like. Diana often took Harry and William outside the palace walls. She brought them to hospitals, let them play with ordinary children, even treated them to fast food, things the monarchy considered unfit for royal image. But Diana knew her boys needed to see that the world was far bigger, warmer, and more human than the stone walls of the palace. When Diana died in '97, Harry's world collapsed. At just 12 years old, he was forced to walk behind his mother's coffin in front of millions of mourners. Yet the most heartbreaking thing wasn't his tears. It was the coldness of the royal family. Charles didn't hug his son, didn't comfort him, only wore a calm expression as if grief had no place in their world. From that moment on, an invisible wall formed between Harry and his father, now King Charles. Harry grew up lonely, confused, and constantly in the shadow of his brother. While William was groomed as the heir, with advisors and direction, Harry felt like the outsider, always compared, always unnecessary. As he grew older, Harry became the rebel prince of the British monarchy. From wild parties to scandalous photos splashed across tabloids, he made headlines and headaches for the palace. But behind the rebellion was a wounded soul, a son who had never truly been understood by his father. When Meghan Markle entered his life, Harry thought he'd finally found someone who understood him, someone who knew what it felt like to be judged and suffocated by expectations. But instead, the gap between him and the royal family only grew wider. Meghan, a biracial American actress with a Hollywood past, was relentlessly targeted by the British press. Instead of receiving protection from the palace, as Harry had hoped, they were left to fend for themselves amid a storm of criticism. Harry began to see the monarchy for what it was, a cold machine that valued reputation over love. The same system that had once broken his mother now doing the same to his wife. By 2020, the breaking point came. Harry and Meghan announced their departure from royal duties, choosing to start a new life in the United States. He once said, "I no longer have a place in that house." Those words cut through every tie between him and his father. Since then, the relationship between Harry and the royal family has been frozen in silence. ChatGPT deny, but beneath all the resentment and distance, there has always been one secret that never stops stirring public curiosity. Since the late 1990s, the British royal family has been haunted by one of its most controversial rumors: that Prince Harry is not the biological son of Prince Charles, but the result of Princess Diana's alleged affair with a cavalry officer named James Hewitt. The spark for this speculation came from what seemed like a small detail: appearance. As Harry grew older, many noticed his striking red hair and facial features that bore an uncanny resemblance to Hewitt's. Side-by-side photos of the two flooded tabloids, fueling endless debate for years. Diana and Hewitt had openly shared a close relationship during one of the loneliest periods of her marriage. Hewitt himself admitted they had been deeply in love. But when the rumors about Harry's paternity spread, the royal family immediately denied them. Hewitt also insisted that his relationship with Diana began years after Harry was born. Still, the public never stopped doubting. To many, coincidences like that don't just happen. And the royal family, they believed, always had something to hide. For Charles, the rumor was a wound that never healed. A man already burdened by the collapse of his marriage now had to endure whispers that his second son didn't share his royal blood. The press twisted the knife, labeling Harry as the spare but not the heir. And over the years, even without words, the distance between father and son only seemed to widen. Harry grew up surrounded by those whispers. He heard them in the army, in pubs, even splashed across the front pages of newspapers. People said he was the outsider, that even his blood didn't belong to the monarchy. Perhaps that's why Harry became so determined to break free from the title of prince, as if trying to prove to the world that he didn't need the Windsor name to exist. Years passed, and when people thought the rumor had finally died down, it came roaring back in 2020. British media erupted when an online document surfaced, claiming to be an unverified DNA report connected to Prince Harry. There was no concrete evidence, but those three letters, DNA, were enough to set the entire country ablaze. Buckingham Palace remained silent. Harry made no comment, and King Charles, frail and weakened by illness, appeared only once in public. Smiling faintly when a reporter asked about it, he didn't say a word, but in his eyes there was something, a mix of understanding and exhaustion. Some said Charles stayed silent because he already knew the truth. Others believed his silence was an act of protection, shielding his son from public cruelty. Whatever the reason, he never ordered a DNA test. Perhaps he understood that what truly mattered wasn't blood, it was love. Harry was still the boy he once carried in his arms, still the child who cried behind his mother's coffin, and still the man he hoped would one day come home. Maybe that's why, as time began to slip away, King Charles chose to let go of everything and reach out to his estranged son. In early 2025, the British media broke a story that left the nation stunned. King Charles's illness had returned, and this time it was worse than anyone expected. Royal doctors advised the king to suspend all official duties for an extended period, focusing solely on treatment and avoiding stress. The news shook Britain to its core, sparking fears that the 2-year-old reign was now facing its greatest challenge yet. New photos of the king quickly spread across newspapers and social media. He looked different, thinner, paler, slower in his movements. During rare public appearances, he often sat while speaking, sometimes pausing mid-sentence to catch his breath. Fatigue was written all over his face, though he still tried to smile, still held on to the quiet dignity expected of a monarch. Buckingham Palace grew heavy with unease. Queen Camilla appeared constantly by his side, her eyes shadowed with worry. Close aides revealed that the king had spent many sleepless nights, struggling with pain and exhaustion. Yet what tormented him most wasn't the illness. It was the loneliness that crept through the very palace he ruled. According to royal insiders, as his health declined, Charles began to change. He spent more time writing, reflecting on old relationships that had fractured, especially those with his two sons. In a private conversation with an old friend, he once said, "Time is the only luxury we can never buy back." Those words led many to believe the king had finally come to terms with his own fragility, and that his deepest regret was not making peace with Harry while there was still time. At that time, British media began circulating a rumor that the king had written a special letter addressed to his two sons. The contents were never revealed, but one insider described it as deeply emotional, heartfelt, and perhaps a final farewell should the worst come to pass. Another source from Clarence House added, "The king doesn't want the final chapter of his life to be written in silence. He wants it to end with forgiveness." Those words spread beyond the palace walls and moved the nation. People began to see the 76-year-old king in a new light, not merely as a figure of authority, but as a father growing frail, clinging to his pride while quietly breaking inside over the distance between himself and the son who had walked away. During that period, royal duties were gradually transferred to Prince William. For the first time since his coronation, Charles stepped away from the spotlight. Rare photos taken at Balmoral showed him sitting by a window, gazing out at the gardens once lovingly tended by his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. To many, that image felt symbolic, a monarch at the turning point of his reign, facing his own mortality. Some said illness had weakened Charles's body, but it had also given him clarity, the kind that reveals what truly matters. Throughout his life, he had lived within the confines of duty, born to be king. He gave up love, entered a marriage of obligation with Diana, and endured years of pain to preserve the monarchy's image. And now, as his strength waned, he found himself questioning whether the title King of the United Kingdom meant anything if he couldn't keep the people he loved most close to him. A longtime royal aide once recalled a therapy session where the king, his voice trembling, said quietly, "I've lost my mother, I've lost my wife, and I don't want to lose my son." It was a short sentence, but it felt like a rare confession from a man who had spent his life hiding his emotions behind a calm, royal mask. Royal commentators later revealed that Charles's health had already begun to decline in mid-2024, yet he had refused to rest. It wasn't until things became critical that his doctors insisted he suspend his duties. The decision was described as reluctant in every sense, because for a man like Charles, stepping away from royal responsibility felt like admitting defeat. And yet, in hindsight, that quiet pause may have been exactly what he needed. In those still days, people believed Charles had changed, less of a king, more of a father. British newspapers published striking photographs, Charles holding Camilla's hand as he left the hospital, his eyes weary but somehow calmer than before. Perhaps by then, he had stopped fighting time, only hoping that what days remained would be long enough for him to forgive and to be forgiven. There are moments in life when pride becomes small compared to the fear of losing someone you love. For Prince Harry, that moment came in early September 2025, when he received news that King Charles's condition had worsened. From distant California, the place he once vowed never to return to, Harry made a quiet, unexpected decision to fly back to London, alone to see his father. No Meghan, no cameras, no headlines, just a son, burdened by regret. In the days before the trip, sources close to him said Harry barely slept. He paced through the garden of his Montecito home, looking at old photos of his mother, Princess Diana, and sighed deeply. Perhaps he remembered her words from long ago that no matter how strict the royal family might be, love is the one thing that never fades. On the morning of September 10th, 2025, a private jet landed at Heathrow. Harry stepped off wearing a dark blue shirt, a long coat, and a baseball cap. Two security guards accompanied him, but none bore royal insignia. Everything was kept completely secret. There was no official announcement from Buckingham Palace, no press coverage. Only a black Range Rover quietly rolled away toward Clarence House. That morning, Clarence House looked different. The gates were closed tight, with only a few guards stationed outside. No one knew what was happening inside. Some witnesses claimed they saw Harry entering through a side door, nodding to the gatekeeper like an old acquaintance. Every eye followed him, but not a single camera clicked. London that day was bright but cold, with a soft wind and a strange tightness in the air, as if the entire city was holding its breath, waiting for something it couldn't yet name. That meeting lasted 53 minutes. No one knows exactly what was said, but one insider later revealed, they talked, they cried, and they forgave. They talked, they cried and they forgave each other. Maybe they didn't say much. But sometimes in relationships that have been wounded too deeply, silence itself becomes the only form of healing. It's believed that Harry apologized to his father not for leaving the royal family, but for the harsh words he once wrote in his memoir Spare, words that cut his father deeply. And King Charles, frail in his gray robe, simply said, I don't want the final chapter of my life to be written in silence. Perhaps it was that one sentence that made Harry break down in tears. They didn't shake hands like strangers. They embraced for a long time as if every passing minute was a gift. A sick father, a remorseful son, no titles, no throne, only blood. When Harry left Clarence's house, he didn't speak to the press. He just bowed his head and walked away, his eyes red and tired. But that look was no longer one of rebellion. It was the look of a man who had just found a piece of his soul he thought was lost forever. The car drove off quietly, leaving behind those heavy gates and 1,000 unanswered questions. That afternoon, British media exploded with headlines. The Daily Mail ran the story, Reunion at Clarence's house, the first step towards healing. For the first time in years, even the harshest critics of Harry were moved. One person wrote online, Diana must be smiling. That 53-minute meeting was more than a private reunion between two estranged men. It was a small miracle in a fractured royal family, because moments like that require immense courage, the courage to set aside pride, to admit fault, to love once more. No one knows what happens next. Is this the beginning of a true reconciliation? Will Harry return to royal life, even halfway, in a half-in, half-out arrangement? Or was this just a gentle goodbye between two people who loved each other too much, but never learned how to hold on? Whatever the future holds, one thing is certain. That morning, Clarence's house was no longer cold. Within those walls that had witnessed so much silence, there were finally words, tears, and perhaps forgiveness. And maybe that was the happiest news the royal family had in 2025, a joy not born from crowns or power, but from the heart. Because in a world filled with rumors and pain, what silenced Britain that morning was not scandal or tragedy, but the image of two men, a king and a prince, finally finding their way back to each other. And what touched the nation most was what many believed to be the outcome of those 53 fateful minutes. After years of distance and bitterness, with every door seemingly closed, this time felt different. For the first time since leaving royal life, Prince Harry's name was being spoken, not in anger or controversy, but with one word. Suamordin. Hope. According to the Times, the meeting wasn't just a personal reunion. It marked a potential turning point. Sources revealed that King Charles expressed his wish for Harry to return in some capacity, focusing on humanitarian and community work, the same causes that once earned him public love, and that carry his mother, Princess Diana's legacy. For the first time in 5 years, the idea of half in, half out, Harry living independently in the U.S. while contributing part-time to royal duties, was back on the table. It was a model once flatly rejected in 2020 when Queen Elizabeth II was still alive. But this time, the palace's tone felt different. Some say it was the king himself who brought it up. A source close to Clarence's house shared, the king believes this is not about duty anymore, but about family. That line struck a chord, because for years the royal family had been defined by silence and distance. Now that silence had finally been broken, not by a grand statement, but by something simple and deeply human. A father and son speaking again. Notably, insiders claim that Prince William, once rumored to not even want to hear his brother's name, did not oppose this time. In fact, within palace circles, there were signs that William's stance had softened, especially as he watched his father's health decline. One royal advisor said, William understands that when his father's time is limited, Family unity is the greatest gift he can give him. And so, what was once thought impossible suddenly seemed within reach. British media called it the happiest royal news of 2025. Prince Harry's name began appearing in national headlines again, but not alongside the word scandal. This time, it was reconciliation. Many Britons, especially those who adored Princess Diana, were deeply moved. They said that if she were alive, this is exactly what she would have wanted, her two sons, after so many years apart, finally beginning to find their way back to each other. Social media flooded with emotional messages. One read, "Diana would be smiling in heaven." Royal analysts agreed, if Harry truly returns, even in a limited role, it could help rebuild the monarchy's image in a time of crisis. Harry's authenticity and warmth could bridge the gap between the royals and the public, a gap that even William and Catherine, for all their grace, have struggled to close. But more importantly, this was also a chance for Harry to heal himself. Ever since leaving the royal family, he has endured years of tension, from being shunned during Queen Elizabeth's funeral to being labeled a traitor for his memoir Spare. All of it left him standing on the sidelines of a world that once felt like home. Now, as he's being offered a chance to return, even in a small role, people believe this isn't just a restoration, it's a rebirth, a way for Harry to rediscover who he truly is, a son, a father, and a prince who carries the heart of Diana. The Guardian wrote that perhaps this was the first real step toward the royal family's healing, not for honor, but for love. In a world full of noise, where every mistake is magnified, the sight of a son brave enough to return and a father strong enough to forgive was enough to make millions believe again. Some wounds can only be healed by time and love, and in that moment, Britain seemed to fall silent. No one knew what the future would bring, whether Harry would truly take on royal duties again. But the fact that they had spoken, that they had embraced after years of cold distance, was already enough to make people believe that miracles still exist. One commentator summed it up perfectly. Sometimes, the crown is not the most important thing. Sometimes it's just about coming home. Perhaps, after all those years of pain and misunderstanding, Prince Harry is finally finding his way back, not just to Clarence House, but to his own heart. Because maybe, after everything, what the royal family truly needs is not honor or tradition, but a genuine embrace. That afternoon, Clarence House was bathed in the soft golden light of a London autumn. Leaves drifted gently past the tall windows. Two men, one a wounded father, the other a once rebellious son, quietly stepped out through the heavy wooden doors. No words were spoken, only a silence that carried deep meaning. It wasn't the silence of distance, but the silence of two hearts that had finally found their way back to each other after years of being lost. Outside Clarence House, people had gathered since morning. They brought flowers, photos of Princess Diana, and small cards that read, "Welcome home, Harry." One elderly woman, her voice trembling, told a reporter, "We just wanted to see them forgive each other, because royal or not, we're all human. We all need family." That image spread across Britain as a symbol of reconciliation. After years of division, the nation finally saw a glimmer of hope, not just for the king, but for a country that had itself been wounded by the royal family's fractures. People said Clarence House wasn't just the site of a meeting that day. It was where love began again. It may take time for every wound to heal, but at least the door had been opened, and the silence replaced by understanding. In a world obsessed with power and prestige, sometimes the greatest act of nobility isn't found in crowns or thrones, but in a simple handshake between a father and son. A handshake that needs no apology, only sincerity. And perhaps those 53 minutes didn't just heal two men. They helped an entire monarchy remember how to love again. A monarchy once lost in pride, now awakened by something beautifully simple, family. As the evening sun faded over Clarence House, Britain felt unusually peaceful. Maybe because, in that quiet moment, everyone realized something timeless. Forgiveness has never been a sign of weakness. It's the only way broken hearts can find their way home.